Have you ever noticed how almost everyone around you seems to live the same way? They wake up, grab their phone, scroll for minutes, sometimes hours, repeat opinions they heard somewhere else, defend ideas they never questioned, seek approval from people who are just as lost. And at the end of the day, they feel a strange emptiness. Now comes the uncomfortable question. What if you are living like this too? What if, without realizing it, you are living exactly like what Friedrich Nietzsche called the herd? The word may sound offensive, but for Nietzsche, it meant something specific. It wasn't simply about living in society. It was about living without thinking, without choosing, according to values you never created. Here is the disturbing part. Most people sincerely believe they are independent. They think their opinions are truly theirs. They believe they chose the life they live. Yet Nietzsche observed something unsettling. Almost no one realizes when they are part of the herd, because the herd does not feel like a prison. It feels like comfort, belonging, safety. And that is exactly why escaping it is so difficult. To understand why, we need to look at one of Nietzsche's most unsettling ideas. According to him, two types of morality shape society: the morality of creators and the morality of the herd. The first is born from strength, the second from fear. And what Nietzsche discovered about this second morality can completely change how you see the modern world. Because it doesn't just exist in ancient societies, it dominates social media, work environments, universities, relationships, even how people see themselves. Nietzsche called this slave morality. Before reacting to the phrase, it's important to understand what he meant. He wasn't talking about literal slavery. He was describing a mindset that appears when people feel powerless. When individuals cannot exercise real power over their lives, something curious happens psychologically. They begin redefining values. Instead of admiring strength, independence, or courage, they start glorifying obedience, submission, and conformity. Nietzsche believed many social virtues were born this way, not from strength, but from adaptation to fear. And here begins one of the most dangerous ideas in his philosophy. The herd doesn't just follow rules, it creates systems to prevent anyone from stepping out of line. Because when someone does, something unsettling happens. That person exposes the possibility that there may be another way to live. And that threatens the psychological stability of the group. Have you ever noticed how society reacts when someone begins to think differently? When someone questions norms, refuses the expected script, stops chasing collective approval, the reaction is rarely curiosity. Usually it is ridicule, pressure, hostility, or rejection. But why? If freedom is something everyone claims to value, why do free people make others uncomfortable? Nietzsche believed the answer lies in something he called resentment. Resentment is deeper than anger. It appears when someone envies what they cannot become. Instead of developing their own strength, they try to diminish the strength of others. This creates a powerful dynamic. The herd doesn't just protect its values, it attacks anything that threatens them. Because when someone lives authentically, they remind others of something uncomfortable. Maybe they could live differently too, but they chose not to. Now look at the modern world. Social media appears to be a space for individual expression. But in practice, it often works as a system of social surveillance. Every opinion is judged, every behavior analyzed. Every disagreement can trigger waves of approval or rejection. This activates an ancient mechanism, the fear of exclusion. Our brains evolved in small tribes. For thousands of years, being rejected by the group often meant death. Alone, humans rarely survived. So the human nervous system developed extreme sensitivity to social approval. Today, that same mechanism still exists. But instead of reacting to a tribe of 50 people, it reacts to millions. Likes, comments, shares, public criticism. Technology simply amplified something already present in human nature, the need to belong. And when that need becomes dominant, autonomy fades. People soften their opinions, avoid certain thoughts, hide disagreements, not because their beliefs changed, but because the brain interprets disagreement as risk. This is where Nietzsche's idea of the herd becomes frighteningly modern. He wasn't only describing the 19th century, he was anticipating something we see every day. A culture where the greatest punishment is not prison. It is social exclusion. But there is something even more disturbing. The herd rarely sees itself as the herd. It believes it is defending noble values, justice, morality, virtue. Yet Nietzsche saw a trap there. When values are imposed by the group, they stop being authentic virtues. They become tools of control. And the more people believe they are morally right, the more aggressively they defend the system. This pattern appears throughout history. Socrates was condemned for corrupting the youth. Galileo was judged for challenging dominant beliefs. Thinkers who question structures are rarely welcomed. They are seen as threats. But Nietzsche believed the greatest danger is not external oppression. The greatest danger is when the mind internalizes the herd. When a person begins to censor themselves, abandons ideas before exploring them, feels ashamed for thinking differently. Psychologist Carl Jung described something similar. He believed society represses parts of individuality, and what is repressed does not disappear. It moves into the unconscious. There it forms what Jung called the shadow. The shadow contains everything we learn to hide: instincts, desires, ambitions, creative potential. When someone lives completely aligned with the herd, the shadow grows. And with it, psychological tension. Because a part of the mind knows. It knows there is something beyond automatic living. But facing that truth requires something Nietzsche believed was rare: intellectual courage. The courage to look inward, to question everything, to face the loneliness that may follow. Because leaving the herd doesn't just mean changing opinions. It means giving up something most people desperately seek: acceptance. This creates one of the most dangerous conflicts in human life. The conflict between truth and belonging. And very often, belonging wins. Nietzsche believed few people can carry the weight of real freedom. Because real freedom does not mean doing whatever you want. It means taking full responsibility for your life, without excuses, without hiding, without guaranteed approval. But society rarely trains people for that. From childhood, we are taught to be good students, employees, citizens. Rarely are we encouraged to create values and think independently. Nietzsche believed creating values was essential for the emergence of a new type of human being, what he called the Übermensch. This idea is often misunderstood. He wasn't describing domination. He was describing someone who overcomes the herd mentality, someone who lives according to principles they themselves created. But reaching that point requires something most people avoid: a rupture. A moment when a person realizes many of their beliefs were inherited. Ideas about success, morality, identity, what a good life means, absorbed, rarely questioned. And when this realization appears, an uncomfortable question arises. If these values are not really mine, then who am I? Many people retreat at this point, because continuing this investigation can destroy comforting illusions. It can reveal that many life choices were guided by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being different. But Nietzsche believed this rupture is the beginning of freedom. When the old structure collapses, a void appears, a space where old values no longer make sense, but new ones have not yet been created. Nietzsche called this moment nihilism, not as a philosophy, but as a psychological experience. The moment when someone realizes many certainties were illusions. And now something new must be built. But not everyone crosses that void. Some run back to the herd. Others fill the emptiness with distractions, endless entertainment, ready-made opinions, superficial conflicts, anything that avoids the hardest question of all. If you were truly free from the herd, what kind of life would you create? Because that question removes every excuse. It places something enormous in the hands of the individual: responsibility. And that is when many people realize something uncomfortable. Maybe the herd exists, not only because it is imposed, but because it protects us from the weight of freedom. Yet Nietzsche believed something inside certain individuals resists that protection, a force that pushes them beyond collective comfort. He called this the will to power, not power over others, but growth, expansion, the constant overcoming of inner limits. It is the force that drives artists, thinkers, and innovators. But the more autonomy someone develops, the less they fit into the herd. And the less they fit, the more pressure appears. Because when someone moves away from the herd, they discover something unexpected. The herd doesn't react only with rejection. Sometimes it reacts with something far more subtle: seduction. The system always offers an easier path. A path where you can still feel special without actually leaving the herd. And that invisible trap is far more common than it seems. In fact, even people who believe they have awakened often remain inside it. And that is the trap we need to understand next. Because according to Nietzsche, there is a form of herd mentality far more dangerous than the others. One almost no one recognizes. And once you see it, the way you understand society and yourself may change completely. The moment someone believes they have escaped the herd is, paradoxically, one of the most dangerous moments in the intellectual journey. Because that is exactly when a new illusion appears, a more sophisticated illusion, more seductive, and much harder to detect. Nietzsche noticed something many thinkers later confirmed. Human beings have an extraordinary ability to turn rebellion into identity. And once rebellion becomes identity, it slowly transforms into a new kind of herd. Think about it. How many people today believe they are independent simply because they disagree with the majority, because they criticize society, because they reject the system, because they believe they see the truth others cannot see? But Nietzsche would ask an uncomfortable question. Do you really think for yourself, or did you simply change groups? There is a huge difference between leaving the herd and joining another one. On the surface, the person appears rebellious, but psychologically, the mechanism is the same. They still seek belonging. They still seek validation. They still seek approval, only now from a different group. This happens constantly in the modern world. Movements that begin as questioning often become new orthodoxies, new dogmas, new tribes. And within those tribes, critical thinking disappears again. Because every tribe develops invisible rules. What can be said? What cannot be said? Which ideas are accepted? Which ideas lead to rejection? And suddenly, the person who believed they escaped the herd is once again adjusting their opinions to fit in. The difference is that now they feel intellectually superior, and that makes the trap even stronger. Nietzsche saw this as one of the greatest dangers of the human mind. The need for belonging is so powerful that it can infiltrate even rebellion. That is why true intellectual independence is extremely rare, because it requires something most people avoid: psychological solitude, not physical isolation, but the ability to exist without constant validation from a group. This is harder than it sounds. From childhood, we are trained for the opposite. Approval means safety. Rejection means something is wrong. Belonging feels comfortable. Disagreement feels dangerous. Neuroscience even shows that social rejection activates brain regions similar to physical pain. To the brain, exclusion literally hurts. That is why many people silence their perceptions to maintain harmony. It explains why many ideas are never explored, and why many people live lives they never consciously chose. Nietzsche believed most people do not truly live. They follow predetermined paths. They grow up with certain values, enter certain careers, chase familiar symbols of success, and only much later an unsettling feeling appears. The sense that something essential was lost. Nietzsche called this living reactively, a life guided by external expectations instead of inner direction. But creating your own direction requires questioning what seems obvious. For example, what does success actually mean? Most people answer automatically: money, status, recognition, stability. But if you examine that closely, another question appears. Are these values really yours, or were they absorbed from culture? Societies create definitions of success, and individuals pursue them without investigating them. Nietzsche saw this as a subtle form of domestication. Society shapes desires, then convinces individuals those desires are their own. And once people believe they chose something, they defend it intensely, even if it was never truly questioned. Now notice something interesting. Whenever someone decides to live outside those collective definitions, the reaction is often strange. Sometimes it appears as concern. Are you sure that's a good idea? Sometimes as criticism. That's not realistic. Sometimes as ridicule. That will never work. But rarely as curiosity. Because when someone breaks away from social patterns, they reveal something uncomfortable. The established paths may not be inevitable. Machiavelli observed something similar. Anyone who challenges an existing order faces two problems. Those who benefit from the current system become enemies, and those who might benefit from a new system do not yet believe in it. The result? The innovator often stands alone. Nietzsche never romanticized this path. He knew becoming an individual involves conflict, external conflict, but even more importantly, internal conflict. Because abandoning inherited values forces a brutal question. If there is no ready-made script, how should I live? Nietzsche believed each individual must answer that question. There is no formula, no manual, no final authority, only the process of creation, creating values, creating direction, creating meaning. This leads to two very different ways of living. One life seeks approval, the other seeks expansion. When someone lives for approval, decisions are guided by social reaction. What will people think? Will this be accepted? Will I be rejected? This kind of life can create stability, but rarely greatness. Living for expansion is different. Growth always involves uncertainty, because growth means crossing limits, and crossing limits creates discomfort. That is why Nietzsche saw human development as continuous self-overcoming. The most important question is not, am I right? But, am I growing? Growth requires confronting your own limitations. It requires destroying outdated versions of yourself. And that process is painful. Carl Jung described something similar with individuation. To become a complete individual, a person must integrate parts of the psyche that were suppressed. Ambitions, instincts, shadows. When these parts are denied, they return as frustration, envy, and resentment. Exactly the emotions that feed herd mentality. Often, the herd is made of individuals who abandoned their own potential. And when someone abandons their potential, they begin to distrust those who did not. That is why organized mediocrity often tries to pull down whatever rises above it. Not always out of malice, but because excellence exposes a difficult truth. Maybe we could also go further, but we did not. So the question becomes, how can someone avoid these traps? How can a person escape both the traditional herd and the rebellious herd? Nietzsche distrusted simple answers, but he pointed toward a direction. An authentic life requires three rare things. First, brutal honesty with yourself. The ability to examine your motives without self-deception. How many of your opinions truly came from your own thinking? How many were shaped by the need for acceptance? Few people dare to ask these questions because the answers can be uncomfortable. Second, the courage to tolerate temporary isolation. Anyone who thinks deeply will eventually step outside certain social agreements, not out of arrogance, but because genuine reflection rarely produces automatic conformity. This does not mean rejecting society. It means not depending psychologically on it. Third, the commitment to self-overcoming. Nietzsche believed human beings are not fixed. We are projects in progress, a bridge between what we are and what we could become. But crossing that bridge requires discipline. It requires resisting the temptation of permanent comfort. requires choosing growth, even when growth is difficult. This is the essence of Nietzsche's message. He was not teaching people to be rebels. He was teaching something far more radical: to become creators, creators of values, creators of meaning, creators of themselves. And that completely changes how you see life. Because once you assume that role, the question stops being, what does the world expect from me? And becomes, what am I capable of creating? That question is both liberating and terrifying, because it removes excuses. It places responsibility directly in your hands. Nietzsche believed most people do not truly want that responsibility. Many prefer comfort. They prefer following established paths. They prefer living inside ready-made narratives. The real mistake is believing you are free when you have never examined the invisible forces shaping your mind. So, here is the question worth carrying with you. How many of your ideas truly came from you? How many of your choices were conscious? And how much of your life is still running on the autopilot of the herd? Nietzsche believed awakening begins exactly there. The moment you start observing your own mind. The moment you realize many certainties were inherited. And that maybe, just maybe, you have far more creative power than you ever imagined. But discovering that requires something rare: the courage to think, the courage to question, the courage to become something that does not yet exist. If this reflection resonates with you, subscribe to the channel Arte da Conciencia. Like the video so it reaches more people willing to think beyond the obvious. And tell me in the comments, do you believe you truly think for yourself? Or are you still discovering how much of your thinking was shaped by the herd?